Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Her Sorority Journey's first live workshop as part of our recruitment takeover series. I'm really excited for this one because it's not often that we have stuff going on in the news, in the media, that we can actually use as a tool and a resource to really spearhead some of our either education, engagement, and information efforts that we have for potential members going into recruitment. And so my hope is that we can really use the documentary in all of its perks and challenges to actually move us forward instead of feeling like this is going to leave us stuck behind the implications of the documentary. So I'm really excited for us to dive into what kind of impact the recruitment, the Bama Rush, so hard for me to say Rush, the Bama Rush documentary is going to have on y'all's primary recruitment this fall or next spring. So as we get started, I would just love to hear from y'all. What was your first impression of the documentary, either in the chat, or I'd love to see some of us come off mute. What was your first impression of the documentary?
I can kick us off. I would say it just wasn't as much as I thought about the recruitment process, I guess. It was more of just like identifying issues that P&Ms might be dealing with versus like, obviously there was a little bit of what we do on the chapter side, but it was just more focused on that P&M aspect. So I think that'll be interesting to think about as we talk today.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for sharing, Emily.
I heard someone call it a coming of age film, and I think that was really accurate. I think, at least when I was watching it, it was a lot of like stories about the women, but not necessarily about like their rush or recruitment.
Yeah.
Which is like still valid, like validating some of the experience, but not necessarily what Emily said.
Totally. Yeah. Not necessarily what we were expecting. Yeah. Maybe one more first impression. We got a couple questions here, y'all. This is going to be an interactive workshop.
Some in the chat, Katie said, the trailer made me so scared for the upcoming recruitment season. I was so nervous for the content, but after watching, she wishes that it wasn't like all over the place.
Yeah.
And Hannah mentioned she was underwhelmed, more trying to connect with unaffiliated people with Greek life in a way that didn't make the most sense.
Honestly, that like really reflects a lot of the comments and conversations that we've had on different lives this week too, kind of diving into like kind of being disappointed that there wasn't more like substance. I even heard someone say this week that in even just like the way they presented what it was like to go through the recruitment process at Alabama, is like, well, why would anyone want to do that, right? And so I think the underwhelming piece and just like the lack of information and like feeling like everything was like touched on just lightly, like nothing even of substance went deep, was really challenging for a lot of people. While maybe the content wasn't, it was just like all over the place. We didn't actually get anywhere. What were some moments that really surprised you in the documentary?
I loved hearing the Zeta Tau Alpha girls talking about their body image and appearance and just like the way people view sorority girls, because they are pretty much what the sorority standard is, and even they were insecure. So it kind of validated me a little bit, because I am certainly not the cookie cutter, which is neither is anyone. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's super good. We've had like so many conversations about those Zeta gals. Like I thought they were so well spoken, and we're going to talk more about like the identity piece of sorority later, but they just had some great one-liners, like, ooh, that was sharp. I liked that. I also thought it was interesting when they were asked about like hierarchy. Like Hannah said, I think that the way they responded to that, I think, is what actually led them into it's like, I think people have expectations of what we would look like and who we are, and that's not necessarily how we view ourselves. The edited photo scene was really interesting. Like, and I think that's a societal problem for young women, which is really what the documentary touched on mostly. I think that was like the overarching like theme of the documentary, but I did find that super interesting. One more moment that like surprised us.
I think I was surprised that they didn't take the opportunity to like dive deeper into maybe some things that like deserved comments to be dove deeper into. I know there were some women who mentioned that they had been like drugged at parties or like sexually assaulted, and it was just kind of like, okay, well, back to the story. And I think that was such an opportunity that was just like missed on. And like I get reflecting back on like the view of the documentary as a whole and like the point of it, I don't think that was the point, to like look into some of those kind of like scary things, but then I feel like it should have been left out altogether. Like they shouldn't have just like touched it and then like moved on, because I think that really shows that like, oh well, this is just something to expect when you're a part of Greek life, okay, like moving on. And I think that was kind of scary.
And what's interesting about that too, Marissa, is that a lot of those experiences, like the references to like being roofied, sexually assaulted, those all happened before going through the recruitment process for those women. And so I think that was something that was really interesting too, was how casually that was just like looped in with what it means to be a sorority member, when this is actually a societal issue. Not to say that sorority should not play a role in combating this or having awareness around this, but I think that does bring up a bigger question of like how much of this is like contributed to sorority versus like the experiences of young women in 2022.
I think they could have done more from like a harm reduction standpoint on that. You know, my chapter, we're working on, you know, carrying Narcan and making sure that how to know all your sisters are safe and whatever and whatnot. And I don't know, it shouldn't be glossed over. And maybe, you know, just putting like a little, maybe like a warning label or something, and like what to do if this happens to you, because they just said they got roofied. That's scary. I know so many girls who have gotten roofied and didn't know what to do. And it's like, you need to, that's a fixable issue.
Totally. Well, I think that takes us really well into our last like kind of opening question, which is what moments were really disappointing in the documentary, either disappointing in how something was portrayed, maybe something that might actually be true about sorority that was like disappointing to hear, or just the documentary in general. What was disappointing to you?
When watching it, was like taken aback and kind of disappointed by like the talk of like body image and everything, with like, I think it's the difference on how it was portrayed between like the beginning and the end. Like when the Zeta women were talking about it, like the like real feelings feel that. But then when it got into the clips of like measuring out your chips and all that, I was like, okay, well, this woman hasn't gone through recruitment. She's not in a sorority. I think it was the same woman who said she wasn't going to. And then for not only to have that, like for someone to watch the footage and think that like, okay, that's worthy to be put in a documentary, that's worthy to have out there forever for this woman. And then for another woman, a producer, to be filming it and then putting it in there seemed just like kind of icky. And I just thought about that now, of like, if that was your point of making a Bama Rush documentary, like, was that needed in there?
Yeah, and I think that like kind of takes me back to like one of the biggest disappointments for me in the documentary was that it did seem like the documentary was focused at being a coming of age or an experiences of young women documentary, when it was titled Bama Rush, which like implicitly connects these two concepts that, while they are connected, are also operating independently of one another as well, right? So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So I'm glad you brought that up. Let's take one. Oh, here's Kitty. Katie was disappointed that it was just all over the place, confused what 50% of it had to actually do with recruitment. I think the actual TikToks give a better behind the scenes view. The first 10 minutes were straight TikTok videos. I think some Rush vlogs show an individual story better. Yeah, that's super insightful. Thanks for sharing. Well, I'm glad y'all are here. If you are kind of new to her sorority journey, my name is Cassie Little. I started this company 3 years ago to help enhance and restore the sorority experience for women in any season of their membership experience. Whether they are trying to navigate what it looks like to be a part of a sorority, whether they are an active member going deep into some conflict or tension that they're experiencing in their sorority membership, or leadership experiences, all the way through alumni, right? We want to help alumni create these lifetime memberships as well that have purpose and meaning outside of the collegiate structure. We actually have some alumni or almost alumni. Katie graduates in like 3 weeks on today, and so it's super awesome to have y'all here. A little bit about me. I started her sorority journey, and I'm also the host of the Your Sorority Journey podcast. I'm a keynote speaker on topics of leadership, resilience, chapter engagement, recruitment. We talk a lot about recruitment. And I am originally from Portland, Oregon, went to school in Arizona. So I'm a big lover of the desert and the cacti desert scapes. But I currently am a resident of Denver, Colorado. And so I have a lot of fun out here sipping lavender lattes in mountain towns. So that's a little bit about me. And if you aren't connected with her sorority journey, we exist on Instagram, TikTok. Those are our biggest platforms, but we're also a good time over on LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest, and Facebook. So let's talk about what the point of this workshop is today. I had this desire when I heard the documentary was coming out to not just have conversations about it, which we have done a couple times this week through social media on a couple different live platforms, also debriefing things like the trailer when it first came out. But I also want to give you all tangible action items to actually respond to what we learned about the documentary. And like in all of its quirks, I do think that there is really valuable information that we can glean to help us be more informed in the experiences that we're cultivating for potentially members this fall. So we're going to talk about our defensiveness and the nervous anticipation that we had around the documentary. We're also going to unpack 3 major themes of the documentary and how we can respond to them. And then we're going to discuss criticism around the documentary and how those implications exist for us. So as we get started, I want you to like channel back how you felt after you watched the trailer. Does anyone remember how they felt after they watched the trailer? Like, what was that, early May, a couple weeks ago? What were your initial thoughts when you saw that?
I was like very scared and just like very on the defensive. I am an alum. I serve as an advisor for my local chapter, and I also volunteer with the NPC. So from like those conversations that were happening on like the individual organization level and the NPC level, like we were like preparing for a defensive, like taking a defensive. Like I had some of the campus Panhellenics that I work with reaching out of like, how should we respond to this? Like, should we prepare our chapter leaders to say anything? And it was very much just like, okay, well, like focus on how like the recruitment experience is unique at your campus, like because we, you know, initially thought that all of this would focus on like that recruitment experience at Alabama. So I was just like very much on the defensive of like, oh my gosh, like what kind of damage control are we going to have to do? And honestly, like when all of the feedback started coming out about like, oh, well, it wasn't that great, like it wasn't what we expected, like I was very relieved of like, okay, this is not going to be as like big of a, you know, like the end to Greek life as we know it,
Oh my God,
as a lot of these people like were saying it would be.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Marissa.
I remember being really fearful. I was in this room and I was like, oh, watching it. I was like, oh, this is great. And I was like, wait, this isn't great. This is awful. And then immediately went into like damage control, like what programs can we do? What can we do to set ourselves apart? But obviously didn't really need that.
Right. And I think that, yeah, that's a great point. Like we all went into this like react mode. What were you gonna say, Hannah?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna kind of just say like the same thing as Rachel just said. It was like I was talking to our VP of recruitment the other day, and she was like, I'm actually so happy that it's not like the trailer, just because now we don't have to do like, yeah, we're still probably gonna have to do a little bit of damage control, but it's not gonna be like as in depth. I think after the trailer, like we were all a little worried that it was gonna be like way worse than it was. I know like there was a part in like the trailer that like it just made it seem like Greek life was like this horrible thing. So we were all a little nervous about that. So
Yeah, and I think those big generalizations were a part of that, our panic, right? Is it was like, this is what it looks like everywhere, even though it's like a centralized experience. Emily and I were even like chatting about that this week. It's like, man, if they were, oh, maybe it wasn't Emily. I talked to somebody about it this week about, man, like if they really wanted to do a deep dive about like what recruitment looks like, they should have gone to multiple campuses. They should have like surveyed like a lot of different types of women in different parts of the country, like recognizing that it looks different in different parts of the country. Like that's how you can like capture the essence of like the goal of recruitment and what the common factors are across the board. Jillian said, I thought it would defer PNMs from going through recruitment. Me too. Me too. And I think honestly, we are going to need to dive into a couple of those things that might potentially defer PNMs from going through recruitment, or at least create some like unnecessary confusion by some of those topics that were just like breezed over. But I want us to consider how differently we expected our experience with the documentary to be because of the trailer, and how we actually do this too in recruitment. When we think about our recruitment videos that we are putting out, or if we think about like the abroad photos that we are using to promote recruitment on social media, is that actually like the lived experience of our membership? Like, no, like our sorority of 80 to 200 members is not like on a 5-day cruise on the Amalfi Coast, right? Like, as much as I would love that, that's not the lived experience of our sisterhood. Same thing with like our recruitment videos, right? Like in Arizona, like everybody's in a Jeep with like a flag hanging out the back. It's like, is that the lived experience of our members? Like, no, we put on a lot of makeup and get in the trunk of a Jeep and like put together a recruit and spend $5,000 on a recruitment video. And I think it's really important that we recognize that as frustrated as we were, maybe relieved, right? As frustrated as we were by the trailer because of the reality of the experience, our PNMs might be too, right? When they are getting sold something, if it's in a video, if it's on social media, if it's even in conversations in round one that they are not experiencing in the reality, that's where our attention can exist in recruitment, or that's where our attention can resist in retention, right? To actually retain these members, we have to be selling them the same thing throughout the pre-recruitment potential new member onboarding process that they are actually going to experience in their sisterhood. And so as we dive into these like big themes that I think we can act on, it's going to be really important for us to remember we need to be selling them and informing them the same thing that we actually have to offer. So if we don't like it when HBO Max sells us something that we're not actually getting, we can't do that for PNMs either, right? We need to showcase and sell our lived sorority experience, not the one we think PNMs want, right? HBO Max or Max, whatever it's called now, I don't like stream enough to like keep up with all these streaming platform name changes. But if they thought that they would like get us engaged and excited about this documentary because of it being expose, right? And giving us what the people want, but that's not what they actually had to offer. Same thing goes for us. So here are some themes that we can respond to, and I want to be intentional to dive into each one as they were presented in the documentary to help us give some substantial structure to how we can actually respond to this hour and a half that many people feel like they wasted on this documentary. I don't think it's a waste. I actually do think there's a lot of really important themes that we can glean from this to actually set our potential members up for success. And the first one is sorority culture. I about fell out of my couch when that PhD gal, I can't even remember her name, I think her name is Diane, shared this. Rush is a social stratification. It's a demonstration of competitive femininity and contemporary performance of the Southern Belle. That is not sorority recruitment. That is a lie. That is not what we are setting out to accomplish. We also, I'm sure all of us on this call felt the same way every time they use the word rush. It's just like churning in my stomach of like, that is not the experience that we're cultivating. That's not what it's called. We changed terminology on purpose. And the fact that we are like amplifying this past concept of it being competitive femininity and contemplative performance of the Southern Belle is so far from where our organizations have grown and what they are aspiring to accomplish for the women who join them. So I think that's a really good basis for us to consider in the gaps, like the information gaps that we need to take ownership and responsibility in filling, right? There were so many things as we, Katie says, being from the North, I am not a Southern Belle, and that is not my goal with the chapter, right? Like that's not the goal for even very many women in the South anymore, right? So,
And I'm from the South originally, and a Southern belle is just someone who's gracious and kind and inviting and welcoming, and maybe has sweet tea in her living room at all times.
right.
But it's not Scarlett O'Hara, like
Right.
this is not Gone with the Wind.
Right. And so I think recognizing how many things were really touched on, or like Marissa being so involved with NPC, I'm sure you were just like rolling your eyes at the set, like brief overview of each round. They would just like flash up on the screen for a moment. I was just like, you have got to be kidding me, right? Like this is the information we're giving potentially members about what each round of recruitment looks like. So I think this is a great opportunity. Oh, go ahead, Marissa.
I was just going to say, and what's interesting too, I'm sure you're going to go into it too, with like the logistics of recruitment too, of like, we have so many campuses that don't even have a fully structured recruitment anymore, or are not having 4 rounds, or there are some campuses who have 3 rounds of a fully structured recruitment, or some campuses who are in completely partially structured recruitment or continuous recruitment. And it's like, there was not even a mention of, well, this isn't the case everywhere, or like this is something different. So I mean, I work with some campuses who have only like 3 or 4 chapters on their campus, and they use a partially structured recruitment. So now they have PNMs coming in expecting this like crazy, robust, structured experience. And it's like, no, like that is not what it is at all. So I'm sure you'll get into that, but then how is that on the point of each individual panel in it to like educate the potential members of their campus specifically?
Correct. Yeah. And our team talks about PSR, seems like frequently, right? Especially as that is such a better recruitment model for so many campuses. It just serves their communities better, serves their members better. And I think that is probably my biggest disappointment with the documentary, was the like hyper generalization that like, this is Greek life. It's like, no, this is Greek life at one of the largest recruitment experiences of the country. I don't think Alabama is the largest community size, but like largest recruitment in the country. So as we talk first about the logistics of recruitment, it's our responsibility to fill those gaps. So let's talk about what like some of these pieces are. Marissa brought up a great one, like the structure of recruitment varying from campus to campus. I also think like for potential new members, there was I think like an implicit, like a understated belief that you need 10 months to prepare for sorority recruitment. As this started following potential new members in like October of 2021, I believe. The binder, the outfits in a separate suitcase, even like parents coming along with you, the necessity of a recruitment coach, and assimilating your image, your look, your preparation with other women's is just not reflective of the experience we want to like usher potential members into, right? And so I think we have to keep in mind those elements when we're thinking about what needs educating and what needs like overhauling. And there might be some more to it. Are there any other like logistics of recruitment that you noticed? I put manners on here too. I know Michaela at the end was talking about how she was like, it's bad luck to drink water in recruitment. I'm like, oh, sister, for the love, would you please drink water in recruitment? Like, we don't need another PNM on the ground. Like, there's already enough that pass out drinking water. So I think even conversation prep, there is this like funny dude on TikTok that made this comment about small talk. It's like, if you're scripting your small talk, it's no longer small talk. And I'm like, thank you, right? Like, what would it look like instead to just like have on hand like some of the most impactful memories or experiences that you've had in high school or your first couple of years of college, or as a sorority member, like at your events, like times you've invested or sacrificed for your sisters, not the list of the events that you've attended. That's how you engage in small talk in sorority recruitment. Is there anything else that you guys would want to add to this list, or things that came up for you that you were like, oh, snap? Sorry, I'm like reading these at the same time. like, oh snap, we're gonna have to do some like better educating on this topic because it's brought up in the documentary.
I think they emphasize a lot like, oh, this is my sorority resume, and I've had this proved however many times, and I had to get all of these letters of recommendation. And I mean, I'll be the first one to say, like, I also serve as a local chapter advisor for organization at an SEC school. To be honest, like, all those headshots that we get in the mail, like, we're not looking at them. Like, don't like it, everything's computerized right now. The amount of PNMs that we're dealing with at large institutions, like, I am not looking through the individual, like, Lily Pulitzer-ified resume that you send. Like, put the information on your, you know, ICS or campus director application. Like, that's what we're going to look through. Like, you have a headshot on there. I don't need a printed out like 8x10 headshot of you. Like, it is just like the volume of PNMs, especially at so many of these bigger schools, like, you don't have the time to go through and look at all of those headshots. Like, that's why everything's been digitalized for a reason. Like, it's not necessary.
Also, it's been digitized as like to remove an extra barrier to entry. 8x10 headshots are expensive, right? Like 8x10 resumes are like, when I go get my resume printed, last time I applied for a job before I was an entrepreneur, those are expensive to like go into like an Office Max and have printed. Nevertheless, on a campus like Alabama, to do that 19 times, right? Or wherever, right? Another SEC school, even if you're doing that 4 times for a smaller campus, like that adds up. And that's a perceived inhibitor for PNMs to be able to like financially access this experience too. The rec letters piece Katie mentioned, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. And I think just like I think that's like another area that we need to re-educate, is just like the digitizing of things. That's super good. We're going to talk, flipping the script really quick. I think this is recruitment related, but not about the logistics of recruitment. We also need to talk about like the expectations of membership, because we are not just recruiting these members to like go through this process. We are recruiting these members to like be a part of our sisterhood, right? This like, there's an experience after bid day that we need to talk about. Ryan, near the end of the documentary, made this comment: I wish they were less concerned with tradition and more concerned with well-being. And I think that's something that many of our chapters are actually doing a great job at, right? Many of our communities are like throwing tradition to the wayside. And so we need to make sure that they know, our potential new members are aware of how we are worried about their well-being. And why some of these things exist if they have like passed our tradition audit, why we still have some of these rules in place, why we still have the expectations of judicial processes in place, right? Because we are still an organization that wants to further women and help them develop personally, professionally, emotionally, spiritually for society. So there still needs to be some parameters in place for us to accomplish that. I think the 2/3 rule needs to be addressed, like on most campuses this year. And that's like a rumor that's been going around for a while. And I think one of the biggest things I took away from this documentary in general was just the fact that I think a lot of the things that were spoken were subconscious prior to the documentary going out. Like, everyone just assumed some of these rules were just the way sorority operates, when many of which have been thrown out or modified or changed to promote the confidence and individuality of our members. We need to make sure that that's communicated, so there isn't an expectation that to leave the sorority house, you need to have like 2 out of 3 done, or you can't be on the first floor with wet hair. That's not the way most chapters are running things. So rules, standards, judicial. I also think the financial piece, and we've had a lot of conversations about this around financial transparency, but there were some numbers thrown up there. And obviously Alabama is very expensive. It includes a meal plan. There's a lot of other factors in there. We need to be very upfront with how much our experience costs, mostly for the fact that our PNMs need to know that it does not cost as much to Alabama as it does anywhere else in the country, right? Like, that is not the standard. And we need to set not only more realistic expectations for our PNMs, but we just have to like give them the transparency up front of what they are signing up for. And I think that probably needs to come in some format, even before your version of an orientation, to ensure that they are even just like coming in the door, that they know this is an option for them. I also think it's an important thing for us to consider how we are addressing this fitting the mold concept that came up a couple times, and we are going to talk a little bit more about belonging as we continue. But I think it's going to be really valuable for us to celebrate and promote members' individuality. And we can't do that if we are asking all of our recruiters to show up in the exact same way, in the exact same style that might not reflect their own. There needs to be more individuality this year on social media, in our recruitment in our pre-recruitment conversations, if that's what we really stand for, right? If we are asking our members to show up as their authentic selves, we need to give them the space to do that in and outside of recruitment. And then finally, that tradition versus well-being thing that we touched on earlier. Is there any other expectations of membership that you heard like super briefly touched on that you feel like we're going to need to do a little bit more information spreading about this fall?
Probably just the time commitment of
That's good. Yep.
being in a sorority, but also what we do, because I feel like there was a lot of emphasis on partying, but I go to twice as many philanthropy events as I do date parties. They're just not, they're volunteering, they're out in the community, they're doing, we're doing stuff with foster kids. So it's not like advertised and that we don't see it all the time, but there is a time commitment, but it's a good time commitment. It's a worthy time commitment. I'm honored to make it.
Totally. Time commitment, that's really good. Awesome. Okay, we're going to keep going. The next piece I think is going to be really important. The next bigger theme that I think is going to be really important for us to touch on is the identity piece. There was a lot of really passive comments made around finding who you are from the sorority that you join. Some of the Zetas even talked about people assume what you're going to be like as a sorority woman, right? Or the Zetas are talking about people assume what you're going to be like as a sorority woman, and they clarified like, I want to be known as a woman who's in a sorority, not a sorority girl, because I am a person apart from my sorority. And so I think it's going to be really important for us to clarify and communicate who tells you who you are, right? A lot of passive comments around where the rankings come from, the role fraternity men set in that. And I've actually talked about this a lot. And one of my initial comments from the trailer when Isabel made that comment about, I'm just like, I just don't know who I am. And I just like want to go to college to figure who you are. I don't think that's like an unrealistic desire that our PNMs are having, right? Or that we have, right? To go into college and say like, I want this like new group of people and these new experiences to give me some support to help me figure out who I am. But it gets misplaced when we try to find our identity, our value, our worth in that organization, right? That we allow how others view that organization to dictate how we view ourselves. And so I think we need to ask the questions in your community, who is telling your chapters who they are, right? Who are we allowing or who are we looking to dictate that? Is it Greek rank? Are our members accustomed to ask fraternity men which chapters are the hottest? Do we have a lot of members aspiring for the Greek experience to tell them who they are, or aspiring for their college experience to tell them who they are? Does your chapter define you or allow you to learn about yourself and develop into the woman you want to be? I think each campus is going to look a little different around where some of these pieces come from or the role they play, but I think it's really important to remember that sorority women on most campuses hold the social capital, right? They are running the show. Who they associate with, the on-campus clubs and organizations that they are a part of thrive with their involvement. I also think it's a really important power that we have to steward effectively and decide, okay, how am I being intentional about who I'm associating with, which fraternities, which clubs and organizations, even which like multicultural groups, to help elevate their social capital on campus too, right? How am I aligning with people and helping share and redistribute that power? Because if we're redistributing that power to fraternities who are perpetuating this cycle, then we are doing a disservice to the future of our membership and our current members. So I think it's really important for us this year to retake our power and reconsider who we are giving that to, so that when we do redistribute that power, it goes to the right places to help elevate, include, and like welcome in a community that's really elevating one another. I think a lot of that can also come from like strategic partnerships with other sororities to elevate our like Panhellenic sisters as well. Does anyone else have any thoughts from the identity comments that were made? I don't want to brush over this because I think these conversations were really impactful. That's so good. Sorority calls for the highest and best that is in you. That's not to say that sorority will make you your best self, but sorority can be a vehicle to pull that out of you. I totally agree. That's why I'm sure Marissa, that's why you continue to do the work that you do. And Hannah and Emily, right? All of us that are on the other side of the collegiate experience, we stay involved in this because it has cultivated something in us that we want to be able to give back and allow sorority to pull out of generations, future generations of women. The last component that I want to touch on that we can't brush over is the belonging piece. Isabel makes a comment that my people are in the way. When I get to Alabama, I hope that I can just let myself be me. She talks about not feeling like she can fully be herself with her family. She's a certain part of herself that she is with her family. There's a certain side of herself that she is with her friends. And she just wants a sisterhood of people that can fully embrace and fully understand like every side of herself. In that, there was a lot of other barriers to people feeling like they had been able to belong in the past. Comments, condescending comments from men, a lot of casual, as we talked about at the beginning, mentions of eating disorders, sexual assault, anxiety, depression, feeling like an outsider in their family. And I think this could be the biggest purpose for us all watching this documentary. Like if Rachel Fleet did nothing else, she helped us give light and own that there is a mental health crisis for young women in our country. And we have to be prepared to accept them and greet them with compassion, recognizing the societal pressures that not only they are facing, but we're facing. This might have been like a subconscious thing that we have been wanting to like dance around in the past on certain campuses, but now it's out there. It's been stated and said, and it's time for us to adjust the way that we are creating confidence and empowerment for our potential new members so that they can see themselves belonging before they even arrive at our chapters on bid day. Any other thoughts or questions on this acceptance or belonging piece before we talk about what we should do about this? Anybody?
I was just thinking, just kind of like almost giving like not like a warning. I don't know like what other word I would use, but to be honest, being like on bid day, like you like don't expect to get into this chapter being completely yourself. Like it takes time to break down walls, and like I don't know how big everyone else's chapter is, but like at least at like Florida State, like our chapters are like over 150 women around, usually like around 200. So like knowing that like just because you're in the same sorority doesn't mean everyone's going to think the same, and doesn't mean like everyone's going to be so accepting at first, like to still like give yourself time to open up.
Yeah, that's a great action item from this.
We always sell this idea of like, you're going to meet like your best friends. Like, okay, you may meet your best friends throughout your sorority experience, but you're not going to meet your best friends on day one. Like that is not the norm to like run to your house on bid day and meet the woman who's going to be standing next to you on your wedding day. And like, that's the experience that we sell, but like, that's not everyone's experience. Like it took me over a year into my sorority journey to like find my core group of friends. And I wish that we like spoke that more into even our new members during that new member period of like, it's okay if you don't have your best friend today. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay if you don't like see the person who's going to be by your side all through college today, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to find them during your sorority journey.
That's so good. And that was the first thought that I had when Isabel was talking about, I just like need people who can like accept and embrace every side of me. It's like, that's a lot of pressure to put on people that you just met, and not to say that you shouldn't show up as your full authentic self, but I think that there are some resources and opportunities for us to direct PNMs to be able to like get comfortable with themselves too and who they're becoming in this new season, in the same way that we want to embrace them as they are, and support and give them the like support to, I don't know, have endurance through the journey, right? And not just like get hung up when they don't find their 5 bridesmaids on bid day. Yes, Grace.
I think that also we need to talk about how being a sorority isn't just going to fix like if you're having a bad call, if you're not having a good experience, if your mental health is not going to just be fixed as soon as you go through recruitment. Honestly, it's probably going to make it worse.
Totally.
If it's not managed, if it's not, if you don't have a support system, it's rough. College is rough. And then I feel like a lot of PNMs look at it as like this magic pill. And I'm like, no, it is a time commitment. It's taxing sometimes to go through just the rush process, not even the new member process. So it's not a magic pill. It's not going to fix everything for you.
And the reward of the relationships comes from investment, right? Like the reward of what we gain in sorority comes from intentionally investing. Does that mean sacrificing your mental health? No. Like, does that mean like forming yourself to be someone you're not? No, but it does require you to get outside of your comfort zone sometimes to balance. We talk about this a lot in her sorority journey. Self-care was showing up, right? Balancing how you care for yourself so that when you are present in your sorority, you are able to put your best foot forward. So what can we do? I think the most important action item that we can take is owning our own narrative, right? So often we get frustrated. We're going to end with a little reflection on this. So often we get frustrated when we are associated with media scandals or things in the news about fraternity and sorority life that don't reflect our experience. So we need to own our narrative. We need to own the experience that we have. I think the best response that we can start to use in recruitment this fall, this is one of the questions that was asked. It's in the caption of one of my like Bama Rush TikToks that's doing really well. When people are asked, oh, is that what, bring up some like provocative element of the documentary that maybe reflects an experience that you don't relate with. I think the best response that we can have is, that's actually not reflective of my experience, but can I tell you about what my sorority experience has been like? And that's the easiest thing that we can do, right? Instead of trying to defend and understand and go into the weeds of the experience at the University of Alabama, we can simply say, that's not my experience. As individuals, we can say this. That's not my experience. Can I tell you about what it has looked like for me to be a member of my sorority? Personal experiences and stories go the farthest, but from an organizational level, I think we can look and break down our applications into social media and events and programming. This is for like our Panhellenics at large. Not to say there's not like individual action items that we can take, but for the benefit of this time together, I wanted to break it down by social media, the role social media can play, and the role our events, programming, and marketing around recruitment we can use. So we need to be sure, specifically from the sorority culture side of things, that our social media is utilized to inform and educate, right? So we need to be giving information that's going to help educate potential members about what it realistically looks like to be a part of our community. Not like we love the Amalfi Coast, whatever that. We love the luxurious vacations, that might not be educating our PNMs and what it looks like to be a part of our organization. I also think on social media, it's really important that we stop participating in platforms or with organizations that elevate identity-based membership, right? So organizations that are contributing to these things, finding opportunities to denounce green crank, yik yak, any fraternities that are outwardly elevating or negatively contributing to the reputation of sororities on our campus, we need to put a harsh stop to. And we need to start collaborating with other organizations that elevate sisterhoods, right? Other Panhellenic chapters. So what would it look like to host sisterhood events and showcase on social media the sisterhood events that are happening within your Panhellenic community or within your Greek community at large, right? Especially collaborations cross council can show this sense of inclusion and identity that is so much more than the organization itself. It's the relationships that are being developed outside of individual chapters, outside of even councils. And then I think the last piece for belonging and acceptance is actually showcasing members' stories, having them give like short testimonials of how they have found belonging in their chapter. If that's a little video, if that's a quote, if it's photos of sisters. And in our social media, we need to be so intentional to be showcasing different women. We need to get outside of the 5 women who contribute to the photo circle and actually go to our sisters who we know are doing amazing things and say, hey, we'd love to feature this intern, you participating in this internship that you have this summer, or we'd love to showcase the relationship that you're maintaining with your big while she is studying abroad. Finding ways to showcase different types of members, their stories and experiences can move the way that our members are known, especially if we want to promote communities that are not trying to fit people in a mold. It requires us to showcase our members who don't look like stereotypical sorority women, right? We know what that look comes from. We know the sorority accounts that go viral every year around recruitment for elevating a certain type of image. We need to be communities that are okay with showcasing all of our different types of chapter members, recognizing that that's what communicates the message that all are welcome and there is room for you here. Yes, we are a membership-based organization based on values, not based on lifestyle, not based on passions or interests. We are here to celebrate diversity. We're here to celebrate different thoughts, different career paths, and create a space where you can grow with women that look different than you. So that is our social media piece. For events and programming, I think it's really important that we recognize those pieces of misinformation in sorority culture and even in identity, and how to address them effectively before our potential members even show up on campus. So yes, there's an element that needs to happen of that on social media. There's also a piece of that needs to happen in emails that are going out to PNMs before recruitment, on our website, like easily accessible ways that we can rewrite what it looks like to be a part of our sorority that can be accessed before women even go through the recruitment registration form. We need to talk about these things in potential member orientation, especially those expectations of membership. We can't wait till after bid day to talk about what it looks like to be a member of our organizations beyond recruitment, and create opportunities for potential members to understand what the experience looks like on your campus. If you are confident that your experience doesn't look like the experience looks like in Alabama, then you need to differentiate yourself and explain what your sorority experience looks like on your campus. And then finally, we need to be officers, we need to be sisters who actually live the sisterhood that we want to welcome potential new members into. We talk about this a lot at Her Sorority Journey. You cannot cultivate the culture of a sisterhood that you are proud to welcome PNMs into the week before recruitment. This work needs to happen now. It needs to start by investing in sisters, investing in other officers, cultivating space, opportunities, maybe little challenges over the summer for your sisters to stay connected, both on the Panhellenic level and even in the chapter level, so that when recruitment happens, there's already a baseline of relationships for PNMs to like come into the fold of. So we talked about 3 big themes, and here are some of those big questions that we can ask ourselves about how we can move forward. What are the gaps specific to my campus that me and my officers can fill to create confidence in P&Ms? I am a strong believer that clarity breeds confidence. When we have clarity around expectations, when we have clarity around what's going to be expected of us, what the relationships are, what the dynamic is, we can have confidence walking into those situations. And that's a great way for us to redistribute some of our power back to potential new members, is increasing our level of clarity and transparency. Identity. What can we do to dismantle the narrative that exists about fitting a mold to be in a sorority? And then finally, how can we cultivate a community that we are proud to welcome potential new members into and also ourselves need? So as we wrap up here, I want you to think back to why you were nervous about the documentary. And also what has made you nervous in the past about being compared to or associated with Greek life at the University of Alabama. We don't need to share, but I just wanted us to reflect on that, because when we feel defensive, we need to evaluate why. Why do we feel defensive? What is it that we are concerned that this documentary might share, might demonstrate? What are behaviors that we don't want to be associated with? It is totally okay to be nervous. Even 2 years ago, before this documentary was filmed, I was in speaking gigs, talking and making jokes about communities needing to dismantle false beliefs because of Bama Rush talk with the communities I was working with, right? Like, this is not a new thing. This is not like a new challenge that we're facing. But is there part of our experience that we are creating on our campus that we wish was different, that we are worried about exposing? How do we desire to be more inclusive, more welcoming, with lower barriers? What are some of the things that we know are just different about sorority life that we are afraid of being exposed? And what can we do about that? It's not too late to make changes that our P&Ms and our current members will benefit from. It might look different than how things have been done in the past, but if those changes create more confidence and less anxiety on our part, why wouldn't we change it? Why wouldn't we make those changes to create the experience that's actually going to create the spaces of belonging and acceptance that we desire for future generations of women and ourselves, right? Selfishly, we all want that place where we know that we're accepted and belong. We do a lot of work on this, Her Sorority Journey. We do speaking events for potential new member orientations, recruitment counselor trainings. And so if you are looking for educational programming for an event that you have coming up or training that you want to facilitate, we would love to work with you. Our potential new member keynote is called Embarking on Your Sorority Journey. We do community kickoffs and recruitment counselor trainings called Redefining Recruitment Ready, to help you get back to the purpose of recruitment for your community and actually cultivate individual ownership and sisterhood, recognizing that there might be some conflicts that need to be overcome around what the normal sorority experience looks like to begin with. We also have some courses for potential new members and recruitment counselors to help dive into what's expected of you and what are some things that you can prepare for in recruitment to walk in confidently. Same thing goes with recruitment counselors. We help them unpack some of their disappointment and tension that they're experiencing in their sorority journey so they don't carry that into recruitment. So if there is an opportunity on your campus that you are looking for support, I would love to connect with you. And even if there isn't, we would just love to stay connected with you on social media, because Her Sorority Journey desires to enhance and restore the sorority experience across the country however we can. The QR code is to my calendar if you'd be interested in connecting further about anything we talked about today or other opportunities for us to partner in the future. But just know that Her Sorority Journey is really thankful. I am personally really thankful that this documentary generated something in you that you wanted to take action on your campus and on your community, to not just have wasted an hour and a half, but actually make impactful changes that benefit the members in your community, and the members that are going to grow your community next year. So thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions, I'm going to hang out for a few minutes. I'm really glad that you all took the time to be with us today.